Live Twin and Evil Twin is a dual archetype based on VTubers that moonlight as phantom thieves at night. Their main deck versions are Cyberse monsters, in line with their VTuber personas. These are the Live Twins. The extra deck counterparts are their real identities and are fiend typed. They're just actual people. I don't know why they're fiend. I guess crime is evil. To extend off that, all of the spells are Live Twin, whereas all the traps are Evil Twin. The archetype is pretty popular, however, it hasn't been a definitively meta archetype in its history. It had moments, namely as a perfect hybrid with Sprite, but it wasn't necessarily the best Sprite build. Other than that, when you actually hone in on the archetype by itself, there are glaring flaws that prevent it from truly standing on its own. Let's start with the faces of the archetype. Live Twin Ki-sikil and Live Twin Lil-la functionally do the same thing. If you summon them, you can get a copy of the opposite from deck. This way, no matter which one you summon, you can tap into their extra deck counterparts. They have unique effects that trigger when your opponent attacks while you control them. Lil-la makes them pay 500, while Ki-sikil gives you 500. Of course, these effects are pretty irrelevant, since you're not leaving them on the field, but it maintains the theme that the two are coordinated. For balancing reasons, they can only fetch the other name on summon if you control no other monsters. This does make it so they can't become Cyberse Link Pile Slop, however, it also weakens their own combo potential. It's not a deal breaker, but it does have a tendency to hamper the deck's inherent ability to build a strong board. The two both have alternate outfits like most VTubers. These are represented in Ki-sikil Frost and Lil-la Tree. They're both free summons so long as you control the opposite name, and their grave effects are far more relevant than the effects on the original ones. If your opponent adds a card to their hand while Frost is engraved, you can banish her and draw a card. Treat sinks a monster's attack by damage inflicted involving a twin monster. Notably, this includes if they inflict damage. The fact that they're both free summons from hand when you control the opposite name means if you get ashed, veilered, or impermed, you can still combo. The sad reality is that you'll rarely see the right extender when you really need them. So you'll just have to pray your opponent holds their ash under the assumption your hand does more. They're pretty good cards in the deck, but they're also the last cards in the deck, aside from one that we'll come back to later. Because of this fact, the deck is very small, almost as if it were made with the consideration of a Duel Links deck count. But the point is, they provide a very good foundation for the archetype. Stepping into the extra deck, we have their Phantom Thief counterparts. They can both be made generically, so long as you have a monster of their name as material. You obviously still want to make them with both, as they rely on both names to function together. They can revive the other name from grave, so long as you don't already control a card of that name. And when they're summoned while you control an opposite name, their effect procs. Lil-la can pop a card, whereas Ki-sikil can draw a card. They also lock you into fiends from the extra deck if you use their revival effects. I assume this was done because they could still just end up as Cyberse Link spam slop otherwise. The fiend lock was a bit of a stinker for the deck. You still had access to the nightmares, which was good, but other than that, you had Unchained as the only other options. And while the big dog was an okay stand-in boss monster for the deck, it didn't have a lot of room for synergy with Unchained's actual main deck, since the twins are your normal summons. At least back when they came out. Of course now we have cards like Muckraker, Yama, and Sharvar to actually connect the decks together better. It's an issue that has and will continue to fade away with time, especially if they keep up with the Fiend Link pile design. The deck's main combo plays out as follows. You link summon the one whose effect you want first. So, for example, you make Ki-sikil if you're going first to get the draw. Then you use her effect to revive a Lil-la, link her and the revived Lil-la off for Evil Twin Lil-la. Then use Evil Twin Lil-la's effect to revive the Evil Twin Ki-sikil, which triggers her draw. The act of performing this combo is 5 summons. That's right! A deck that gives you a draw or a pop as your only interaction loses to Nibiru. Cool design balance. What makes it even worse is originally the deck wanted you to execute this combo and then link off both for another copy of Ki-sikil. This way you could revive the Lil-la for a pop on your opponent's turn. Since the deck couldn't summon past this natively, you couldn't end on Abomination and Ki-sikil. So you really had to scrape the bottom of the barrel for these two to work early in their lifespan. Also worth noting, because of how chain links function, this deck is very susceptible to any number of sequence fuckery. On the one hand, it does ask you to be more thoughtful with your timing and sequencing them. On the other hand, it means the deck gets hosed pretty easily by board wipes that aren't named Nibiru as well. Want to revive Ki-sikil and get a draw for some semblance of compensation? Too bad. The deck has absolutely zero insulation against sudden board wipes. I will say, the way the cards function gives them unique synergy with cards like Sprite Carrot, Sprite Red, Forbidden Droplets, Enemy Controller, Ballista Squad, Substitute, Panther Warrior, Cannon Soldier, Goblin Biker Grand Breakout, Jinzo Laird, Vector Scare Archfiend, Goki the Blade Ogre, Decode Talker, and Power Code Talker. You can tell which of these are relevant based on when your eyes started to bug out of your skull. The point is that the loop of clearing one from your field for another card's effect to then revive them to get their effect is a satisfying gameplay feat. There's just one minor issue with this design, however. This game has graveyard hate. A little too much of it. And considering they're both light and darks, this is homophobic design. Granted, the revival effects are quick effects, but very rarely do you find yourself getting the opportunity to outwit your opponent with sequencing. It mostly comes down to, did your opponent read before activating the banish? The final monster in the deck is actually also an evil twin. It's the two of them together, being the only main deck evil twin name. Sadly, it's not very good. To summon them, you have to tribute 2 links, and they gain 2,200 attack and defense if both named links are engraved. They force your opponent down to 2 cards, but the process of getting them out isn't super easy into an established board. Also, you're tributing off the links to summon, so you would have already popped the card with Lil-la. Not exactly synergistic design. To add to that, the card itself doesn't do much of anything else, so it's not that great. Considering the other monsters have pitiful attack stats, a big beater makes sense, but it's too resource intensive and isn't exactly the best payoff. The only neat thing about it is that it can be summoned from the hand or grave, so it's not entirely useless, just not exactly helpful in the deck's current state. It doesn't help that being both names is actively a detriment as well, seeing as you can't use the revival effect of any of the links if you control them, meaning you funnel all your interactions into a beater that OTKs in Duel Links, and not the actual game. It's honestly sad that possessing both names is a detriment in this deck that revolves around them. In Burst of Destiny, we would receive the only singular addition to the archetype in Trouble Sunny. Sunny allowed the deck to now better use the twins as interactions, being a link 4 you made with both that could tag out into both names as a quick effect, being able to actually trigger both effects at the same time. This way you could also chain block Ki-sikil's draw with Lil-la's pop. I don't know what world your opponent ashes your Ki-sikil, but rest assured, you'll never have to live in it. Board breakers and chain links still hose the deck. But Sunny is still a massive boost regardless. Sunny also provides the best form of removal in the game. By binning an evil twin from hand, deck, or face-up field, you can send a card your opponent controls to grave without targeting. This means you can bin the brick and out a card, or if you have to, you can use one of the twins on field. Then use their revival effect to get back the one you sent. Just one tiny annoyance though. It specifies if it's from the field, it has to be face up. Now, you can't set links. However, the brick is not a link. I don't think it'll ever come up, but the fact that it can makes me prepared for my brains to come up. Sunny fixed the deck's core issue by giving it a legitimate win con, as well as a way to better execute the deck's main game plan. Not only is she a big beater, since she can tag out as a quick effect, she can be used to get far more damage off in battle. I feel like we forgot one issue, though. In a cruel twist of irony, she synergizes with your own Nibiru, allowing for you to activate her effect, then chain your own Nibiru to wipe the board, summoning the twins after the Nibiru has resolved. Sunny made the deck far more competent, but it's clear that Nibiru ensures the deck can never be good in a best of 3 setting. Not without Sprite Gigantic specifically, which also prevents you from using Sunny. Not to mention, in Master Duel and the OCG, the Roach exists. Cool. Just draw 6 so I can end on a single draw and a pop, of which loses to Raigeki. That seems like a balanced trade, and that's all the monsters. At least it would be. Konami decided to print one-off cards to boost each of the tactical tri-decks they made, of which Evil Twin was one. El Magi Mergi is the one the twins got. I don't think this card actually belongs in twin lore, but it's clearly designed to help the deck. It's a level 2 Psyburst that contribute a Psyburst or Link monster to summon itself. Psyburst being the live twins and Link being the evil twins. And she gains attack equal to the combined Link rating in Grave. The brick sends both Links to Grave to make this 1600. And with Trouble Sunny in the Grave, that's 3200 attack. Now you can still not OTK with those numbers. What an improvement! She has both their hair colors. So this is either their child or them fused together. Of course, she isn't a name, so she doesn't conflict with the revival effects, and the tribute is a quick effect, so you can use it to dodge things like Imperm. But I don't think that makes this worth playing. You can't search it with any of the archetypal cards because she isn't in the archetype. And while you could run Signet Mining, as it's also a searcher for the normal duo, this deck is trying to farm +2s, not -2s. Konami then decided to release this new Link 4 they directly advertised as support for the deck. This is just worse Trouble Sunny. I'm aware the card is good generically, it's just insulting that they advertised it supporting the deck when it's likely the only deck where the card isn't breaking the game. After you've done the Trouble Sunny combo, you can then convert Sunny into the twins and back into a Baoku, which can then bring back Sunny, giving you 2 pieces of interaction. Notably, one that doesn't get rinsed by chain link resolutions. Still loses to board breakers though. I don't think we're resolving that issue. All it took for this innovation was 4 more summons, after you've already been Nibiru'd out of the game. It doesn't address the deck's biggest issues, as we've established by now. More summons is not what the deck is struggling with. They need more names, but most importantly, reliable insulation. An answer to Nibiru, Raigeki, Maxi, and now the Mulcharmies to an extent. Otherwise, they can't play the game to begin with. Onto the spells, we'll start with the non-archetypal spell, Secret Password. But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? At least in the case of Evil Twin, they still have an archetypal search spell. This just functions as 6 copies, so it's fine that it isn't searchable. It also has the neat bonus that if you control both twin names, it can be used to search an Evil Twin monster instead. And as we discussed right now, that isn't actually a good bonus. What causes me to constantly misremember what this card can do is the fact that they decided to separate the ability to search an Evil Twin trap from an Evil Twin monster between 2 different clauses. Sure, adding the Evil Twin search at the start makes it easier to get access to them, however, it needlessly uses up more card real estate. It's not that difficult to get both names on field, so it would have been fine to have just included it at letting you search any Evil Twin card. I love this game, dog. Keep that secret password a secret, Anarchy. The actual archetypal search spell is Sunny Snitch. It's also a continuous spell that provides a far more pertinent version of the main deck Twins effects. Every time your opponent performs a summon, they lose 200 life points and you gain 200. This seems innocuous, but it can very well end up being what gets you within lethal range. Or, if your opponent is low already, it can end up putting them in checkmate. 2 summons after the Magi Mergi Evil Twins combo, and your opponent's cooked! Considering the burn effect is attached to a search spell, it's plenty welcome. Also, it isn't a hard once per turn, so it can stack. Obviously, you're only allowed to activate 1 a turn, but it's still very funny. Channel is the archetype's field spell, and it's not good. Like, at all. When your opponent attacks, tribute a twin and negate it. You can't use the revival effects during the battle phase, by the way. It is quite literally anti-synergistic with the deck's design. Great stuff. Then, at the end phase, you can cycle back a name into the deck, and if you have no monsters, it can go back to the hand instead of the deck. This card accomplishes nothing remarkable. Sure, you could play less copies of the twins in your extra for more space, since you can cycle them back, but it's not very efficient, and running this card for that sole purpose isn't worth it. Lil-la is another non-archetypal archetype card. Whenever you revive a card from Grave, you can burn your opponent for 1000 and gain 500. This is clearly to reflect super chats. If it was searchable and also did something else useful, then sure, you'd probably play it for fun. But since it's neither of those, it's not worth considering. Live Twin Home is an extender or a starter for the deck. By discarding a card, you can special a name from deck. but you're locked into evil twins for the rest of the turn. While discarding isn't the end of the world, the deck doesn't really benefit from it either, and the archetypal lock is a bit too harsh for an archetype that only has 3 monsters, considering the only times you use this are in desperation. After getting both names on field, getting another isn't very impactful or useful, especially with the lock. You're only really using this because your twin effect got negated and you need the other name, or it's the only way you can actually perform the combo because the name count is as low as it is. And once again, it's an Ash magnet, so it's another -2. Kind of messed up for Konami to make the streamer archetype farm -2s.
That's a lot of -2s.
Onto the evil twin traps, we have GG Easy. GG Easy is somewhat of a bad card on the surface. You tribute off a twin for one of 2 effects. The attack boost, which is irrelevant, or turning any twin into a Stardust, which isn't that useful. So it's mostly dependent on the fact that it gives you a twin effect by removing one from the field. This isn't really good enough of an effect to have on a trap card. However, this card has insane potential as a searchable sideboard card, since it stops any effect that would pop any card on the field, while also not popping the activated card. This can stop things like Fire King and U-Bell from going off. It can also stop pendulum popping shenanigans, if that ever becomes relevant. The problem is, it's a middling trap that you can't reliably search, since the only way to search the evil twin traps is the unsearchable secret password. Which, reminder, they wanted you to use this and the next trap I'll be talking about to facilitate tributing off Lil-la so you could revive her, gaining an interaction. Challenge allows you to special a Lil-la or a Ki-sikil from grave, then perform a link summon of an evil twin. This is how you dodge the graveyard hate, except this one, of course. Once again, not something particularly good. It's good under a hyper-specific lens, but actually viewing the bigger picture, performing a link summon on your opponent's turn isn't that big a deal. At least, not while the existing pool of evil twin links is what it is currently. Surely this is how you play around Nibiru. Just end on 1 twin in a single back row. I'm sure nothing bad can happen before the trap resolves. Present is an interesting card. If you have both ladies, you can either give your opponent one of them in a creature swap, or shuffle back a spell or trap they control. These traps have all been okay at worst utility, and the fact the only card that can search them is the non-archetypal one kind of ensures they can't be played at present. So far better accessibility to these cards will make them at least worth considering. Boo Boo Game is not a card in the archetype, but features the girls. It nullifies battle damage once. If your opponent pops it, you can set 2 normal traps from grave to field with them able to be activated that turn. I guess if you could somehow manufacture a way to force your opponent to pop this card, it goes crazy in Labyrinth, but it ain't going anywhere in this deck. And that's all the cards that exist. There are absolutely no more cards that exist as of this moment in time. Absolutely 0 of them. Konami didn't release support during the end of production of this video. That would have forced me to cut an entire joke from the script.
All of you ungrateful humans who took everything away from me will feel my loss and despair.
So, we got a new Link 1 Ki-sikil and a main deck Lil-la. These are boring. We can assume we'll be getting opposites that function similarly in the near future. While the archetypal hand trap negate of the new Lil-la is no doubt useful, it also kind of sucks. It is only allowed to be used when a card is responding to a live twin effect. Your live twin stuff can't be negated. If you open this card, it's essentially more for protecting your spell searches or your twin summon effect. However, this doesn't threaten things like Nibiru or Maxi, because they can just be activated during a window that doesn't involve a live twin. Sparing you from Ash and Imperm is nice, but isn't that the entire point of printing a Link 1? Your opponent is never going to waste a negate on anything other than the Link 1 Maxi. I find myself put off by the Link 1 NMO behind the 2 in sequence. The deck doesn't want to perform more specials into Nibiru and Maxi. Oh, but it's okay because the Link 1 is just an archetypal Maxi. I assume the hidden intent behind this card is actually to make it so your opponent never spends a negate like Ash on your normal summon, as you can then proceed to make the Link 1 and go off. But we're in a hand trap hell format, And these cards also invite that sort of deck building to continue. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Wonderful. If we're not dooming about their place in the current game's environment, Link ones are also lazy design in general. They should be reserved for mechanics that need a massive ease of access boost like Gemini, or only used when it actually accomplishes something unique. Giving the twins this Link one, and potentially another one in the near future, just makes it feel like the deck has Duel Link skills attached to it. And I'm pretty sure, despite being in Duel Links, they don't have a skill. But hey, now you can make the Link ones with Challenge, or summon the brick using them instead. All it took to make these cards better was utilizing the most broken mechanic in the game. Who would have seen that coming? You could also play the field spell now as a way to run one copy of the Link one, as it can then put it back in the extra to then be made with Challenge. Don't know how worth it that is, but the Link one clearly makes it a more enticing idea if nothing else. Overall, they're not bad, but I'm not remotely impressed with their philosophy. They will make the deck better in the most basic sense. Being able to get both names in rotation was one issue, but it certainly wasn't an issue that needed to be rectified with a Link one, and should have been resolved by actually designing more main deck bodies and cards to get to them. It's also a Link one Light Fiend, so it's inherently broken. Great. With this all being said, I will not be retroactively analyzing how my cards interact with these, because I want to actually release this video before the year ends. I'll figure it out later. For more names, the obvious extension to the archetype is printing cards for Sunny and Luna. Sunny is depicted as a confrontational troublemaker in the two cards she exists on. You could lean into that fact for the design of their cards. It opens up a way for the archetype to play on your opponent's turn. This way, cards like Nibiru and Maxi aren't automatic game wins against the deck. The solution isn't always to just make a hard counter to them, but to also introduce a legitimate way to play around them. It's just a matter of fact, Konami doesn't know what they're doing. Deciding a type of playstyle is unhealthy for the game, warranting cards like Maxi and Mulcharmies in their eye, only for them to continue designing them in that way, so they can still be punished for Konami's sins. You'd also want to design alternate outfits for them just like Ki-sikil and Lil-la. But if they're more reactive, these alternate outfit cards should also lean into that fact. Of course, this also means introducing Link 2 versions of the two independently. This also helps alleviate the egregious lock Home has on it, making it so the deck still does something should you actually use it. Trouble Sunny is a weird card because it has implications. Ones that nobody knows. Some people think Luna's name is Trouble, and not Luna, because of this card. For some reason, there's just a Link 4 that is noun Sunny. This means you could print another Link 4 that is noun Ki-sikil, Trouble Sunny, and Gunnar Ki-sikil. That's a different kind of trouble. Speaking of, Ki-sikil and Lil-la have distinct names, ones that can be afforded to be classified as a unique sub-archetype with little issue. Sunny and Luna have names that are present on other cards. Look, if you want to trigger the Link effects with Sunny Pixie and Fairy Tail Luna, I'm not going to stop you. I really don't think printing accept all cards that share a similar name and aren't in the archetype is worth it. At a point, integrity compromises sanity. And is it truly integrity if it's at the expense of it? While Sunny Snitch was future-proof to search any live twin name, it goes without saying they should probably have their own version of Home as well to get them in rotation easier. I think ultimately they should be able to work together in gameplay without necessarily being the exact same in design. The archetype revolving around links and how easily you can move them around sort of leaves a question as to why that isn't utilized. Once Master Rule 4 ended, Konami's care of the more in-depth aspects of links seemed to as well. I'd actually consider playing around with co-linking in the archetype. It's literally on theme with the two linking together in their main deck counterpart. They specifically have arrows designed to point at one another, while also utilizing their revival effects to manipulate placement. Genuinely giving weight to that placement helps the deck strengthen its identity and potentially grant it more unique power. The archetype is called Twin, and yet they don't utilize a mechanic that revolves around twinning. Well, that's just because they're not actually twins, they're just lesbians. I'd use this opportunity to print a pair that are actually twins, with the fact they're pendulums denoting that difference. The live twins are streamers. You could even have the pendulums serve as moderators for their channel. This also gives way to make them cards that are treated as both names to make it easier to make either of the girls. As evil twins, they could also help orchestrate their heists. The fact they're scales reflect how they make sure things go off without a hitch from the background, both as live and evil twins. The only real problem pendulums face being introduced into this archetype is how they'll interact with a card like home. Of course, you could always print a clause that treats them as evil twin while face up in the extra, but there's plenty of avenues to explore. You could also print retrains of the M-Warriors since they're featured in the lore, but I think it would be infinitely funnier for them to receive a dedicated archetype. Imagine if instead of Memento's theme of taking a bunch of forgotten vanillas and creating these hellish specters of them, the M-Warrior archetype is just a bunch of random-ass forgotten vanillas all getting swole together. It's a different kind of gay from the twin archetype, and that's why I think it should be separate. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't hate to see them show up in the archetype. I've chosen to use my moderator idea. In terms of aesthetics, I envision them being portrayed as more simple lookalikes of Chronograph and Astrograph Sorcerer, of course with them being drawn in the same style as the live twins, and naming them 1 and 2 to reflect them being dehumanized moderators. You can see the Astrograph twin is more directly hands-on with his role as a mod, whereas the Chronograph twin isn't, even having the live twin merch just carelessly tossed on his computer out of obligation while using more real estate on someone he actually watches. Before you say anything, Dragon Maid is the only archetype I know I'm not going to make a pendulum for. I think it's criminal that the mechanic isn't utilized more frequently. Every time I do plan to use Pendulum, it isn't to just give the archetype the ability to pen summon. I think how Pendulum works actually offers unique design elements to play off of with archetypes. Konami's hesitance to experiment with them only shows a lack of creativity. In terms of gameplay, the Moderator twins serve as a mechanism to have access to both names more often for the links, and when scaled up, help deal with disruption or set up the deck. The Astrograph twin scales when it leaves the field, but the Chronograph one creates a token when it leaves the field. This is reflective of how he's the one that doesn't do his job, opting to let a bot handle it instead with the token. 2 as a scale gets you a card from both sides of the twins, and also has a way to search password if you control both names, whereas 1 negates and banishes a card activated from your opponent's hand, reflecting the fact he's actually the one that handles banning. For Sunny and Luna independently, there wasn't a whole lot to work with. They show up very scarcely in any of the card art. We don't have a card with a full render of Sunny's live twin avatar, so this causes issues. The main versions of them in the deck lean into playing during your opponent's turn, being confrontational and reactive to your opponent's actions. Of course, I had to set an added restriction on their summon, otherwise they run the risk of being broken staple hand traps. They both deal with columns, and they search out one another. You may be wondering, what's so good about searching the other on your opponent's turn? That's where the alternate outfits come in. While you can summon them the same way as the original twin extenders, they also have the Poplar summon condition, which then ties in with immediately link summoning an evil twin, converting them into more interactions. Design-wise, I had nothing to work with for Sunny, so I just put glasses on her, as I could see her having an alternate outfit with glasses to play up her intellect that she doesn't have, which is also why she's an illusion. Luna, I had the idea of an inverse of her normal persona, being Luna Magica, and wearing a Dark Magician Girl outfit. That way she can be a spellcaster. So, I just forgot to explain the DJ part. Because of the Luna name discrepancy, I realized the only way to connect her name without using Luna was to just include the DJ part of her persona as her defining trait for her archetypal assignment in the archetype. It probably doesn't matter. It probably wasn't worth the time even thinking to try and consider it. Anyways, back to the video. Upstage is their version of home. I decided to keep the discard because even though I mentioned the -2s, it is thematically fitting to discard home for upstage or vice versa. It also has the same restriction, which isn't as big a deal since we're going to actually be adding more extra deck evil twins to the mix. I had the realization that it seemed like a missed opportunity that the archetype didn't make use of words with double meanings, but this is a Japanese game, so far be it from me to say it was an obvious include. However, I have the unfortunate debuff of being American, which allows me to actually utilize double meanings in this context. We'll start with the live twin version of Ki-sikil. This allows you to complete a pair as depicted with the phone case, being able to get an opposite twin. It specifies attributes so it can still be used for Sunny or Luna. Signature is a fan meetup where you're given their signature. You may also notice a familiar figure present who may be foreshadowing something. This card starts with a clause that foreshadows XEs being in the archetype and also lets you take control of a monster in a way similar to Sprite Double Cross. This card also allows you to perform a Link or Xyz summon of an Evil Twin, giving the deck more utility on your opponent's turn. Super Support is about donation goals. Depicted are 2 different point costs for different outcomes. One of those is the effective Upstart Goblin functionally, and the other is an archetypal E-Telly. I don't have the capacity to do so, but imagine the card arts are being recreated with the live twins themselves instead of being the actual card arts. Your opponent gets to choose which one applies, but if you control both names, you can choose instead. You see, this card is actually Gold Pride support because it's 3 more copies of Upstart. Realistically, I don't think this is reliably generic. Sure, lose 500 for a draw, or if your opponent is on to you not playing the actual deck, summon a card you can't. True equals banned is exactly what it sounds like. If you have both names on field, you can call a monster card name. Banish all copies of it from both players' hands face down. Then, if your opponent outs it, you both get any of the banished copies back. This is a direct counter to Nibiru. Is it necessary? Probably not. But is it funny? I think the answer is obvious. Now, on to the Evil Twin portion of the support. We have the Moderator twins as XE pendulums, once again setting them apart from the other twins. To illustrate the fact they're actual twins, I chose to make them both Germa. They also get their own names so as to not conflict with the deck's issues around them. They're both relatively simple in design. If your opponent activates an effect when you have them as a monster, they push themselves into scale and summon an Evil Twin, with Astrographer pulling one from the extra, and Chronographer pulling from the main deck. This lets you actually summon the dumb brick to use its effect reactively potentially. Just pretend I included the text hand or deck. They both also gain effects depending on the names attached as material. Of course, if you have their pendulum counterpart underneath, they get both. They both share the same effect for Ki-sikil, gaining 1,100 attack. Then, their Lil-la effect enables OTKing more easily, being direct and double. Of course, this is assuming you can summon these 2 stooges extremely easily. As pendulums, they can summon themselves by way of slapping material underneath them, with Chronographer's method of doing so being more costly, grabbing something off field. They both have simple continuous effects. One that buffs your Evil Twins, and one that debuffs your opponent's monsters. Overall carrying a theme of managing setup and execution for an operation, being able to align the stars and time itself for things to go off without a hitch. I decided Sunny and Luna's extra deck counterparts should function similarly, but not identically to the other twins. Like the other twins, they gain an effect on summon if you have the opposite name on field. Sunny being a face-up negate, and Luna a graveyard banish. I think unironically, the way the twins function makes this negate actually contextually skill-oriented. Since chain links work the way that they do, a negate like this isn't as potent because you won't be able to resolve it on the spot. Their summon condition differs from the main twins, as they themselves do not revive the other. Instead, they push a link you control out of the way to revive themselves. This allows you to mess around with co-linking and zone placement. The main deck counterpart of the 2 together functions similarly to the main deck of the original twins, with the same summoning condition. Instead, they gain 550 attack and defense for every link in your grave, and are unaffected by monster effects of monsters with less attack than them, echoing this idea that Sunny is unfazed by people she considers beneath her. I feel like this is a far more succinct beater for the deck than the original, even if it is also pretty simple. The Evil Twin counterpart of casing is a unique trap, playing around columns. While it can be used generically, this is just worse imperm, unless of course you're playing the deck. Then the fact you can choose the column of an Evil Twin to shut off is pretty good, especially when you consider how Luna and Sunny can push bodies to another column to give you the functional ability to choose the column. As you can see, Chronographer is hard at work casing the bank they're going to rob. What's that? They're jewel thieves, you say? They don't rob banks? What if I told you that it was a part of the joke? The Evil Twin double meaning of signature is tied to that of a calling card. It debuffs your opponent's monsters on activation for all the co-links you have, and makes it so your monsters are unaffected by any with 0 attack, continuing that theme of lowering your opponent's attack and doing so to actually meaningfully interrupt them. You can also use this as a battle trick, which is very funny. Our last card is another one that revolves around co-linking, and also all 4 evil twins. Depending on which names you control, you can apply a sequence of effects. Ki-sikil to draw a card for every co-linked monster, Lil-la to pop a card for every co-linked monster, Sunny so you can protect your co-linked monsters in battle, and Luna making it so co-linked evil twins do reflect damage. I feel it's a grand payoff to not only having all the names, but also actually utilizing co-linking with your link monsters. As always, I don't think these are the definitive cards the archetype needs, but I definitely think the principles at play are. I will be testing them next year to see if I have gone too far this time. Before I end this video, I need to make an addendum. I've realized the actual best thing to do with fan involvement with the series is to just have a hashtag for people to use for art. Archetype Architect is the most logical one to me, but of course, to avoid confusion, you can also just use Archetype Architect instead. This gives people something to actually do on Blue Sky, and a way for me to actively interact with the community and hopefully actually support artists. What you can post under the hashtag is as follows. Art of any archetype featured in the series, be it stuff already covered like Gradle and Twins, or archetypes that are going to be covered like Vendread, Dragon Maid, and Neospatians. It doesn't have to be stuff I came up with, it just has to pertain to the archetype. I think using it as a way to just push out more fan art for these archetypes is the coolest thing I could be encouraging. It's also a chance to come up with your own cards of the archetype if you want. When it comes to using any art for future videos, I'll ask the artist for permission to use their art and credit them in the video if they permit it. Whenever production on an entry starts, I'll dump out general ideas as art prompts for the videos, but as said before, the hashtag isn't solely for this, so draw all your best for these archetypes. There's a lot of architects, but not a lot for these archetypes. So let's change that. I'll also be leaving a link in the description to a post I made earlier about future entries as well. Go in that post and comment any archetypes you'd like to see featured in the series in the future. And of course, the top 4 liked responses will be dumped into a poll. And have a gay ol' Christmas.